Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Eamon Khan, here with a man who wears many hats, including the Black Horse hat he wears right now, Corey Erdman. Corey, how you doing, sir?
Not too bad. My Blackhawks are in last place, but I still have to support. So better days are ahead.
I can feel the same way as you. I'm currently wearing a football top of the team, Watford FC. Not as in good fortunes as there were a few years back, but we've got some good sporting topics to chop up into at the moment. First of all, you're on the team, talking about hats you're wearing, you're on the team for the big time boxing USA event in February. Sleep Promotions presenting all the fight nights there in Detroit. Talk to me about that card, Corey. What can we expect from that card?
Yeah, I mean it's an exciting start of a new series from Salita Promotions that'll be aired on DAZN. That I think the thought process is that this is sort of a continuation of the legacy of Showbox in that it's really a prospect development series. And it's something that, boxing is always in desperate need of more platforms for prospects, for guys that are sort of on the cusp of contention, maybe are already in contention and need to stay busy, but primarily the growth and the development of young fighters. And when Showtime Boxing and Showbox went away, it left quite a big hole. I mean, that it was a groundbreaking series that launched the careers of so many great champions over the years, and they're not shoes that anyone's ever going to be able to fill. I think conclusively. I mean, it was a really special place and a special series with a special group of people. But I think collectively, the boxing industry and in particular, Big Time Boxing USA is going to carry on that legacy and is going to attempt to do that as best as it can. So in the main event, we have a really good looking 154-pound matchup between two somewhat local fighters in Marlon Harrington and Ardrell Holmes. And I think that it speaks to the ethos of the series in that, we have kind of two fighters with unblemished records, a couple draws on their records who are somewhat local, that in a lot of other circumstances, when you have two fighters in the same weight class, kind of around the same place in their career, if they're from the same region, generally in North America or in the United States and Canada at least, those fighters don't wind up facing one another because we don't have there's not the same reverence for the domestic scene as there is in the United Kingdom. And the Commonwealth titles and the regional titles. Those types of trinkets aren't there to compel fighters and compel promoters to match these types of fighters. But a series like this suddenly gives guys the impetus to make these types of fights. So I think that this main event with Harrington and Holmes is perfectly indicative of what we hope the series will be moving forward.
Yeah, just elsewhere on the undercard, Ali Ismailov, a fighter to keep an eye on as he moves forward in the light heavyweight scene, undefeated as well too. And that light heavyweight scene is currently thriving right now, which is heading towards hopefully the undisputed fight between Beterbiev and Bivol on June 1st. But do you feel that Ismailov, from what you've seen and what you know of him, can mix up and get towards that world title scene when the belts eventually do fragment
I think
in the
so.
future?
Yeah, yeah, and as for when that future is, I think obviously that's reliant upon a lot of things. We assume obviously that this unification is going to happen in June. So provided that does happen, we'll have some clarity at the absolute top of the ladder. But maybe there's a rematch clause, so those titles could be kind of tied up for a little while. But Ismailov is already a guy who I think fairly universally, at least in terms of Ring Magazine, is regarded as a top 10 light heavyweight, a guy who is probably on the lower half of those rankings right now. But he's a guy with a lot of amateur background and with a unique blend, I think, of kind of ruggedness and physicality, but still a little bit of slickness as well. He likes to fight out of the shoulder roll. And so I think optically, for me, he's a very interesting fighter to watch and a guy that, given his pedigree, is someone that could be pushed relatively quickly. But again, that's all dependent on what's going to happen at the top of that division as well.
Indeed, and talking about some of those fighters that need highlighting prospects looking to come through on the rise and get that spotlight that they're getting on February 20th, you have the likes of Devel Smith on there, Joshua Pagan, Joseph Hicks as well too. Have you managed to see some of the tape on them? What can fight fans expect to see from them when they come into the ring on February 20th?
Yeah, Devel Smith is a guy who's been very exciting on the Michigan club scene. I think primarily Joseph Hicks had a date on DAZN last year. I called his fight against Antonio Todd. An impressive performance for Hicks. Didn't get the stoppage, but was a fairly colossal step up for Hicks at that point. I think prior to that, he had only been in about 6 rounders, and then is taking on a guy in Antonio Todd that had given far more established fighters fits in recent times. So he had kind of an impressive coming out party on DAZN just about 6-7 months ago. So really, I mean, Hicks and Smith, those are examples of guys that a lot of this series and a lot of what you'll hear Dimitriy Salita talk about is, bringing boxing back to Detroit. And Detroit and Michigan are such, wonderful historic areas for boxing, so much boxing history, and the enthusiasm for fights still remains in Detroit and in Michigan. But I think there's been a hesitance for promoters to stage shows there because of some of the economic circumstances over the last couple of decades, but also because of that to reach out and find talent and prospects from there. Perhaps because they were worried about, well, how are we going to stage shows there? How do we market them to that audience? Is this an audience that cares about boxing, or are they going to spend money? And I think, Salita has shown that is the case. The energy in the building when Claressa Shields headlined at Little Caesars Arena back in June, it was electric. And I think that showed that this very much is still a fight town. And these are guys in Smith and in Hicks that I would say that if they had been from somewhere else with the same amateur achievements, with the same record, it looked the same way, everything is the same. But if they had been from New York, they might have already been signed and been on ESPN and been on DAZN a couple of times. So it's great for a series like this to give prospects that are just as talented as guys from anywhere else who might have been passed up because of where they're from. Now they do have that spotlight on them. So I'm happy for Smith and Hicks to be getting these types of chances.
I hear that Devel Smith specifically, he's likened a lot to, I know a lot of fighters get likened to a lot of other fighters, that's for sure, but he's tall, he can punch hard, just like a certain Tommy Hearns from the Kronk gym too. There's a lot of feeling about how far Smith can go.
Yeah, and it's also not surprising that there would be that kind of, I mean, the Tommy Hearns comparisons always come out when you see a fighter of a certain build, and if they have a jab and they've knocked some people out, that's the automatic comparison, because Tommy Hearns is the archetype for fighters with that body structure. But I think that more poignantly, he's also the archetype for Detroit fighters. And it's not a coincidence that fighters that come out of the gyms from Detroit, especially if they've trained at the Kronk, there's going to be that influence, because that's what's been passed down. That's the style that fighters like to utilize, and it's a very pleasing style. The fighters from Detroit who have been touched by the influence of Emanuel Stewart and his way of thinking about the sport of boxing, they talk very openly about just wanting knockouts. They don't beat around the bush and say, oh, if it comes, it comes. They talk about that being plan A and plan B and so on and so forth. So Devel Smith carries that kind of mindset into the ring, and I would anticipate he will carry that same mindset into the ring next week.
But every fighter here, is there an element of pressure to make sure they perform and get something big in the form of a highlight reel? We're in a day and age where, for the young fighters coming through now, you've got to keep your name in people's mouths. And the best way to do that is a knockout, and one that really resonates with the fans. Have they got to go in there and really grasp the spotlight February 20th?
I think they are probably feeling that. I think that, the impact that social media has had on the sport of boxing has been it's been positive in so many ways, and I think that it can be positive in that way as well, which is that fighters are probably more specifically thinking about the entertainment aspect of their performance, and they're thinking about what will be a clip that might help me go viral. And we think of that as maybe sort of cheapening the product in some sense, but functionally, if this is something that is making fighters want to pursue a knockout, want to be a little bit more crowd pleasing, then it probably, then that is a positive. It probably produces more exciting performances. And I think that there's added pressure too, because this is the first installment of this series, for there to be exciting performances from the participants, so that the excitement about this particular series, not just them, but just in general, big time boxing USA being something that people want to come back and watch. If we have 4 snoozers, that's obviously not going to be great publicity for the series either. So I think, yeah, there is a little bit of pressure, and some of it is self-imposed, but I think some of it is very much there.
Moving forward, just to divert towards the wider boxing scene, Corey, you and I were having a little bit of a discussion beforehand before we rolled the tape here, and we were talking about, or anticipating at least, a lot of boxing fans were, of Canelo's big announcement. Turns out it wasn't anything to do with a fight just yet, though. But if the feeling is that the second of the Charlo brothers will be the next opponent for Canelo, are you underwhelmed as maybe some of the boxing fans are feeling, given the possibilities of other fights that could have been there for Canelo Alvarez?
Yeah, I think that would I have been more excited about the selection of other opponents? I think yes. I would have been more excited about either Benavidez or Munguia. If you asked me this very same question about 3-4 years ago, I would have said absolutely not. There was a period of time when it felt like Canelo was unbeatable. He was on this just tremendous run, and he was indisputably the biggest star in boxing. And I felt that of the fighters that had a reasonable chance to get a fight with him, that Jermall Charlo had the best style, the best set of tools to beat him. And in a perfect world, that may still be the case, but there's just been so much going on in the life and career of Jermall Charlo, with everything that he's been dealing with outside of the ring, with his mental health and in his private life, and just with the layoff and having to try to get back to his absolute best, that may be too much of an ask for him to get over the line against Canelo at this stage in his career. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I hope we get the very best version of Jermall Charlo, should this be the fight that we get. But yeah, I would have been more excited about other opponents. At the same time, I think that come fight time, I'll have run through all of these possibilities so many times that I think my attitude right before the bell will be, what if we do get the absolute best version of Charlo and this becomes interesting?
Do you think the fan matchmaking of the potential of a pound for pound showdown between Canelo and Crawford could really materialize?
I do think that it could really materialize. Yeah, I think that number one, we've seen Crawford do business with that side of the aisle, so to speak. And Crawford at this point is a free agent. He can make his deals. We've seen him make a deal for a colossal fight, and it happened, and it went off fantastically against Errol Spence. So I think that a lot of the hurdles that might have been there, including weight, I think that those don't seem as insurmountable as they did before. I think that this is a very real fight that could be made, and it seems like it's a fight that both men want, in a sense. I think that there being that kind of pound for pound superiority hanging overhead is a great enticement for both of those fighters. And I think that Crawford is probably at the point in his career where he only wants these big money fights, and he only wants the biggest of possible challenges, because frankly, beneath Canelo and sort of in his more immediate weight neighborhood, if it's not Boots Ennis, there's probably not too much that compels him right now. So I think that there is an impetus to make the choices that would make this fight happen.
Those are two heavyweights in the pound for pound rankings, and jump into the heavyweight division. A lot of movement surrounding, or at least in the last week, now seeing a resolution where Fury Usyk gets a rearranged date. But there was a lot of talk in the UK surrounding whether the injury was legitimate or not. Either way, the fight has been rescheduled. What was your reaction over in the States? I did see it come up. I was in Las Vegas at the time covering Ben versus Dobson. It did make some of the sports news. But what was the feeling regarding the rescheduled date and also Fury's injury?
Yeah, I think disappointment, a little bit of deflation, but on my end, I mean, I'm not going to say it's not surprising because, I anticipated that it was going to be canceled, but I think the reality is something weird always happens around a Tyson Fury fight. Now, that something weird can happen beforehand, a nasty gash in sparring a week or two before the event, a Fury retiring, Fury getting injured. Now, weird stuff happens during his fights. He sits up like the Undertaker after seemingly being knocked out. He clowns around. He has these wacky entrances. Weird stuff happens after his fight. There's just something strange always happens around a Tyson Fury fight often enough that when this came up, I was just like, like it's not surprising because of that. Now, obviously, it's very disappointing. We all have been chomping at the bit to see this fight, to have this resolution of who the very best heavyweight in the world is, and we didn't get it. And also, I want to add that there's probably a little bit of fear too, because there was that period of time where we felt like if this fight doesn't happen on this date, that it's just never going to happen. Both Fury and Usyk at different times have said, "I'm not taking this fight. I've moved on from this fight." So every time it gets postponed, in the back of your mind, you are worrying, "Oh man, like, does this mean it's never going to happen?" Thankfully, it does seem like it will. So it's, I think, both a lack of surprise, but now relief, now that we do have a new date.
Does the cut do anything to change or alter your pick in any way for the undisputed winner?
I don't think so. I think if anything, it gives Fury even more time, to be in camp and to be, better focused on this. And it puts more time between him and what was a fairly disastrous performance against Francis Ngannou. And I think that the further he's removed from that, both just in a physical sense, to give him more time to get into even better shape, but also mentally, for him to be distanced from what happened that night and the scare that was that fight, I think is probably just a positive. So it doesn't change how I view this fight. If anything, I think that, injuries are never a great thing. Sustaining that cut is not great. It could factor into the fight as well. I mean, that's very real, but I don't think that, like, if anything, it's maybe a slight positive for Fury, but it doesn't alter how I'm viewing this fight.
Final topic of discussion off of the back of Ngannou's performance, although not getting the win, sending Fury crashing down to the canvas. He now receives a big fight in the form of Anthony Joshua, who seems to be on a bit of a resurgence in his career, having linked up with Ben Davison. Do you feel that Ngannou can cause very similar problems that he did to Tyson Fury? Do you feel that Joshua might have a struggle coming over those big, long arms that Ngannou has as well, that Fury struggled against too? How do you feel this fight plays out when they enter the ring?
Yeah, I want to be respectful to Ngannou because, his performance did surprise me. I think it surprised most people. I think anyone that will tell you that they genuinely thought he would almost beat Tyson Fury is probably lying to you. They were probably saying that because they knew that the YouTube headline would get them some clicks. I don't think that anyone genuinely thought that that was going to be the result of that fight, and that includes Tyson Fury, which is probably why he looked the way that he did in that fight. I think that as impressive as Ngannou was, and as much as he did surpass my expectations of him as a boxer, and he certainly surpassed Tyson Fury's expectations of him as a boxer, that I think was a very real element in that fight. Fury did not show up in shape. I know he said he had an 18-week camp and he took it seriously, but the condition that his body was in would tell you otherwise. I think that Fury thought that he would be able to more or less just mess around in that fight and swim without getting wet and get out of it without any trouble. And that did not turn out to be the case. And again, this goes back to the fact that Fury can have, these weird moments and these lapses in conversation that just creates strange moments. I don't think that Anthony Joshua has those same compulsions. I think that he will be brutally serious in this camp, and that I think that he will not have the same difficulties with Ngannou that Fury did. Now, do I think that Ngannou could still be dangerous? Certainly. As you mentioned, he has, that exceptional reach, and certainly he has raw, natural power that makes guys do funny things when he touches. A composed and technically sound and focused Anthony Joshua will win this fight, but because Ngannou had the performance he did against Fury, even if he gets splattered in the first round against Anthony Joshua, he'll get another colossal payday in the sport of boxing as well. So it won't be the end of the road for Ngannou, regardless of what the result is.